Hey guys, so first off, sorry for the lateness of this video. I was actually working on my next video build, which I'm really super stoked to show you. So yeah, I was finishing that off, just delayed doing this slightly. Also, I've put in a bit of extra time on the narrative for this one, which you can see at the end of the video. Really love what I've done with that. I hope you do too. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. So, out there in the world of crafting, there really are some amazing trees, and you know, there are some really realistic trees as well. One of the things for me that they actually really sort of fail on is their use within the game. Yeah, they provide obviously great scenery. Yes, they can provide things like line of sight, obstruction, but what I really wanted was to be able to get up into those trees, and that's why these have been crafted so that miniatures can readily stand throughout these trees and play a part above ground as well as on the ground. So I'm really chuffed with these. So the main video, I'm going to move a couple of these. So the main video is dealing with this big bad guy here. Let's just chuck a couple of these out of the way. This bad guy here, this is the one that the video is going to focus on. The same process goes into these much smaller ones. There's also these. Now I don't really show these in the video. So these are just using real branches and twigs. And I'll talk a little bit about what you need to think about if you're going to do these ones at the end of the video. So, let's build this. So, I had no real defined plan in mind here. I knew I wanted a tree that was going to be quite a reasonable size, but as for its design, no idea. So I just started marking out with a Sharpie straight onto the foam, ready for the cutting out. I let the tree build organically after having looked at some photographs of bonsai trees, so I knew I wanted this sort of sweeping curl. I let the rest just happen. So, in my eagerness to get finished, I actually made a mistake here. One of the things you're supposed to remember about EVA foam is you need to heat seal it first, then PVA seal it, or plastic coat seal it. I forgot to heat seal it, and I'd also put the tin foil on before I put PVA on. So that comes back to bite me in the ass a little later on, because there remains a bit of a spring in these outer branches. It doesn't impact too heavily, but it is there. So just as I was editing the footage for this tree set, Tabletop Witchcraft put out his video for trees, which was a really cool video, really liked it. The one thing though, he used a glue gun to create the bark like texture, and it worked out fantastic. It really looked nice, and I'm going to try that on a future tree. But his bark was running top to bottom vertically. I actually wanted bark that ran around the tree, and that's why I'm using the PVA and kitchen roll, so that I can actually get this circular bark that goes around the tree. This is upholstery foam. It's what's used in the seat part of your sofa, and it really is an excellent material for both terrain builds and cosplay. I have a lot of it. I always beg old seats from people who are chucking their sofas away. I recommend you do the same. And this is going to go on to create the bulk of the foliage that the miniatures will be able to stand on. Because I want to paint a large quantity of upholstery foam, the easiest way for me to do that is just to use a stain. And I have this forest green stain that is actually for weatherproofing your fence panels. Poured it into the tub and then shove in the upholstery foam so that it gets a good staining. The only thing I will say is I thinned my stain down just a little too much, and so the colour was a little weak afterwards. I like to keep my flocking cheap, so sawdust it is. I do have some stained sawdust, but I didn't have enough really for what I was working on now. And I also use vermiculate, which is another garden-like material, very cheap to get. You can see me talk about that in my ground cover video. PVA, and just wet that down to make sure the PVA bonds, and then I'll paint that afterwards. When it's all dry, we're on to paint. So I sprayed the whole thing with a base coat of black, followed by a brown, which is actually a Rust-Oleum colour that has a rusty kind of colour. Works very well. And I also have some green, which I give it a bit of a spray of that as well, which will just help to suggest mosses, lichens growing on the sides of the bark. It can take a couple of days for this upholstery foam to dry, but once it is dry, just find the most choice bits to adhere to the branches with hot melt glue. I'm looking for positions that allow movement with miniatures in gameplay. It's time to add some variety to the greens that are in the foliage. Any yellows and blues will make a green for you. The thing to remember is to vary it between bluer greens, i.e. more blue in the mix, and yellower greens, yellow in the mix, so that you get a lot of variety of greens in the foliage itself. Now, as a commercially working illustrator, I actually prefer to mix my own colours. However, if your green goes too vibrant and too lurid, you can add a little touch of red, and that will just naturalise that green quite considerably. I had to work harder on this foliage simply because my original staining I'd thinned down too much. I recommend not thinning that stain down. The final layer of paint on the foliage is actually just a fairly heavy dry brush of a pure yellow
This will still look green simply because of all of the green around it, but it will just give that intense colour that you see in leaves on real foliage. Now it was at this stage, once all these pieces of upholstery were on the main structure, that I realised I had an overbalancing problem. It was easily addressed. I just added some extra foam pieces and extended the base somewhat so that it no longer tipped over, and it worked out perfectly fine in the end, and that was just painted up to match the rest of the base. The final touches were done with just a little bit of a dry brushing using acrylic paints, and then it's ready for some awesome treetop play.
Okay, so as you can see, this is the tree that I did make. So there's a little bit of flex in this tree, but to be honest, it doesn't really have any impact on miniatures being able to stand on it. Even if you go down the simpler route of using the real twigs. The only thing I will say is these smaller twigs, you want to hit those with a hot melt glue gun to just give them a bit of strength, because they can snap and crack very readily. So one of the things about these trees as well is they're more in scale with that sort of epic Fangorn like forest that so many of us love from our fantasy literature. So I've loved putting these together for you. I can't wait for my new gaming group to get their first encounter on these, which is what they were built for. If you've enjoyed these videos, it really does go a very long way if you can like, subscribe, put the video on in the background and just let it play through. That watch time is so all important. And if you really want to go the extra mile, you've got my Patreon, which you can head over to and support me there on my big World Warfare project. And so next week, I'm really looking forward to showing you the Dungeon of the Dead 3 build from Waterdeep's Descent into Avernus. See you later, guys.